first, then Suzanne Ogden, and kind of get your reaction to what you've been hearing so far. Dick, why don't we start with you?
Well, I'm a little bit buffaloed by everything, I must confess, because on the one hand, the underlying potential is fundamentally Pacific, at least if one believes that the world economy will stick together with reasonable Chinese growth rates, reasonable American growth rates, and so on. The worst possible thing would be to unravel that American economy, that international economy, by virtue of things that happen in East Asia. That would be the tail wagging the dog, and I think no one wants to see that occur. On the other hand, the basic conclusion that we reached in our book, which I shouldn't advertise, but as long as it just happens to be here, I'll hold it up. The basic conclusion that we reached in our book, to which Joe and Graham and others contributed profoundly, was that little things can sometimes make a big difference, even when the overarching sort of underlying agreement on peace is very strong, or at least quite strong. No one wants to say that Germany did not want to improve its position, in 1948. Of course it did. The real question is, how far should it go in doing that, and was giving a blank check to Austria to humiliate Serbia the best way of doing that? I think a little bit greater reflection on the part of the Kaiser and Bettmann Hollweg would have indicated an entirely different outcome to that conclusion. And remember that it was only a few days later that the Kaiser did vary from his assumed blank check and try to get the Austrians to hold back. So there was a lot of very ineffective, short-term and small issue kind of calculations. Could we have issues of those sorts in Asia? Yes, we definitely could. And in fact, one of the things that is most worrisome about nuclear powers to become involved, that means the United States, and that means an escalation, obviously, of whatever kind. So if each one of these powers, maybe with our help, had strong coastal vessels, had abilities to prevent escalation because of the inequalities of local forces on the spot, then I think it would be much less worrisome that it would escalate to involve Japan, the United States, China, and so on. It is crucial that we build up the military forces of Vietnam, for example. It is crucial that we make sure that the Philippines has adequate coastal vessels, which it certainly does not have now. I think if we're going to keep this limited, we have to make sure that as far as possible, it is the locals that will be able to handle it with our help, our background help, but not as a primary venture by us or the Japanese or China to come in and sort of carry all the weight. So I am actually not as upset by the current arrangements, even though I think they have to be strengthened in these ways. Because even if there are some imbalances in power, the question is, what is the usability of force? It's true, small, little coastal vessels can use force, but do we want to see submarines then suddenly firing on aircraft carriers? I think that is very, very unlikely. I mean, the last thing the Chinese would do, even if they could do it, would be to sink a U.S. aircraft carrier. So that even if there are slight imbalances at the strategic level, those don't seem to me to be too likely to lead to escalation, because the consequences of doing so would be so overwhelming that both powers would hold back. And then they would find having the cell phone of the other guy being very, very helpful. And I know you all heard the story that David Ellwood tells time and time again about the Chinese, about the Soviet submarine that was in trouble, and managed to call a nearby vessel. And of course, the nearby vessel was an American vessel, and it turned out the commander of the Russian submarine that was in trouble, and the commander of the possible savior destroyer had both been in the same Kennedy School class in 1982. And so it was possible for them to talk about these matters and get things resolved, even without consulting higher authority on either side. This is the kind of thing we want. We want the locals to be able to handle matters themselves insofar as that's possible.
Okay, let's go to